Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, so here we are, a government commission report, but the Migration Advisory Council comes up with some findings and some words that I can scarcely believe, because what they're saying is that EU nationals should be subject to the same rules as migrants from the rest of the world after free movement ceases to apply to the United Kingdom. Wow. Because I've been saying that for 20 years. Why do we have a discriminatory migration policy that says if you're an unskilled migrant from Bulgaria, that's absolutely great because you can come in unlimited numbers, but if you're an engineer from India or a doctor from New Zealand, we're going to actually make it much tougher for you to get to Britain. It's always struck me as being crazy, always struck me that we should actually have a non-discriminatory migration policy. I've fought for that, and I've argued for that, and this report says it. And it goes on and says other things, which I was surprised. In fact, the MAC added that it found some evidence suggesting lower skilled workers had faced a negative impact. Yes, I've been arguing that for year after year after year, to be told by the entire array of the political class that I was wrong. Now, that's not to say that I agree with every finding in this report. I mean, they say they don't believe migration's had a negative effect upon the health service. Well, all I can tell you is our population's increased by 6.5 million since 2001. You can work it out for yourself, whether there's more pressure on the health service or not. But what's interesting to me is the language. The centre of gravity of debate around migration has changed in this report. I welcome it. In fact, I would say, actually, in many ways, it is music to my ears. Now, whether this will actually be applied by the British government, and whether there are some details in the small print that mean it may work out differently, I'm going to reveal over the course of the next hour. But to begin with, folks, I want to ask you, do you think that it's right, that this is the way forward, not to discriminate, not to give any preferential treatment to EU citizens against those that come for the rest of the world? What do you think? And if you think, no, come on, we're going to have to give special treatment to the EU because they are our next door neighbours, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think, do you know what, this sounds great because it sounds like it'll be a fair, sensible system, then text to 84850. Or maybe, like me, you think these may be fine words, but in reality, particularly with Theresa May as Prime Minister, none of it is actually going to happen. Then please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course watch us on Facebook and comment there too, as you always do. Let's get straight in to your opinions on the MAC report this morning that says that once free movement has ended, EU citizens should have no preferential rights, and that the United Kingdom should move its migration policy towards higher skilled workers. It sounds very sensible to me. I wonder what Darren, a new caller from Woking, makes of that. Good evening.
Evening, Nigel. Good to speak to you. First time I ever have. Thank you for all you've done for Brexit and the country.
Well,
that's
very sweet of you, Darren. It's not over yet. I suspect there may be one or two more hurdles to cross. But
yeah, I'm pleased you're back on board with leave means leave, even if it was a little late, maybe. But that's a different discussion.
Oh, do you know what? You get criticised in life for going too early. You get criticised in life for going too late. But I'm going to be out there over the course of the next few weeks trying to get Brexit voters reinvigorated and to get them to talk to their MPs, whether they're Labour or Conservative, and to say, look, we are not morons. We know what we voted for. Don't betray us. But we'll come back to that over the course of the next few days. Darren, on the face of it, these headlines of this report, does it make sense?
Absolutely. For as long as I'm mid-30s, for as long as I've been politically engaged, which is from a very young age and quite sad, I've been a massive pro-EU supporter and was a pro-supporter of mass immigration until the referendum was called. Started to try and educate myself as much as possible, keep an open mind, and ultimately took the view that Brexit was the right thing. And the reason being, one of the main reasons when it comes down to immigration, which wasn't the main factor, but mass migration across Europe stifles our ability as a country to be able to allow people from across the globe to come and enrich our country and enrich our cultures. And what it does is it actually forces, because we have conservative governments that say we want to get migration down into the tens of thousands, and we end up with these false misnomers of immigration policy where we can't take international students, where we can't take doctors from India, where we can't take businessmen from America or China, Australia. And this is absolutely what the result of Brexit is all about to me. It's about us opening the doors, looking globally, not insular, within 27 nation states. It's about starting to build our country for the future and breaking away from a trading bloc that is significantly declining year on year. And ultimately, the emerging market to the rest of the Western world is where we need to be. And I truly believe this is the first step of that.
Darren, you're a true convert to the Brexit cause.
Yeah, I was a massive. I was the guy that used to defend mass immigration, defended the EU, defended the programme, defended the socialist nature of spreading the wealth across Europe. At the end of the day, if you're one of the richer nations, it can only result in one thing, and that's that you're going to end up one of the poor. You're going to net contributions are going to be greater than what you get back. Okay. And the more and more I looked into it, on balance, I took the view that I wanted to leave, and more importantly, I still keep an open mind. And nothing has been said to me. The most difficult issue is the Irish border, but nothing has ever been said to me that makes me believe that I made the wrong decision.
Not even Vince Cable today in his leader's speech.
Vince Cable, I don't agree with the second vote, but look at what the idea is here. And anyone listening that can't see this, right? What we're suggesting with the people's vote is that we allow a government to completely mismanage a democratic will, the biggest democratic will this nation has ever shown. 17.4 million people, mismanage it, scare people through that mismanagement, then go back to the people and say, do you want this terribly negotiated deal or do you want to remain? It is laughable. The other option on the table that people talk about is a three-way vote: remain the deal or leave without a deal.
We cannot have.
What then happens?
No, Darren,
it's the vote.
Yeah, Darren, we cannot have a multiple-choice referendum. And I have to say, even though I don't think much of the Electoral Commission, even though they did clear me this morning. By the way, anyone see that on the news? Anyone see on the news that the 2-year investigation into whether I'd done anything wrong in the referendum, that after 2 years of agony, today I came out with a clean bill of health? You will not see that on the news anywhere. But Darren, I promise you that the Electoral Commission themselves wouldn't allow it. Darren, I thank you for your call. Graham texts me and says, all immigrants should be treated the same according to the skills we need. Graham, if it's immigrants coming in to live in, not just to work, but they're immigrants coming to live, it shouldn't just be the skills that we need. It should also be a confidence that we have that they will assimilate culturally in our country and become part of our society. That, I think, is very important. It should be based, I get, on a working visa supported by the employer and based on income, not skills. Well, they will tend to be similar things. But I do think that's an important point, that we've confused this. Coming here on a work permit and coming here with an automatic right to settle and bring your extended family are two different things. And I want to say this to any Remainers out there who say, oh my God, the strawberries will rot in the fields, it'll be awful. If we need foreign labour, we can have foreign labour, but we'll do it on a work permit, visa-based system. People who come, bring their own health insurance for a time-dependent period. That, to me, makes sense. You can challenge that on 03456060973. We'll go to Fulham and speak to Chris. Chris, what did you make of the headlines that came from this report this morning?
Well, it's nonsense, isn't it? Let's put it this way, we're missing out on something else here you've not mentioned. We've got 400,000 French people moved here when the socialist government failed in France. We've got people from all over Europe that have settled here and do add something to the mix. And we have many millions of Brits all over Europe.
No, we don't, Chris.
Listen, how many people in Spain and France are Brits? All right, what we need to do,
Chris, we may have a million living across Europe. Many of those living in Ireland, incidentally, which is slightly different. But anyway, there are hundreds of thousands of Brits living full-time in Europe. I'll grant you that.
Yeah, I'm a Brexiteer, but what I'm saying is that the people that are already here, living here, working and contributing,
Yep.
all right, get the right to stay. The same as Brits abroad, they get the right to stay.
Chris, I've never, Chris, argued against that. I've always argued that even though I think we let too many in, if you came here legally, then of course, we'd be a banana republic to turn our backs on that.
Yeah, but then immediately after March 29 next year, if we manage to navigate past this idea of a second referendum without trying to stick down their throats with Project Fear, then it should be the way you say. If we need foreign labour, they come on
Absolutely.
a ticket, and they come with insurance, and it's for a limited time period.
So on the face of it, Chris, the report makes sense, yeah?
It makes sense, but it leaves out the people that were already here legally.
Right, okay, I take that point, but I think now the government have taken on board that anyone that came legally is, of course, going to be able to stay. Chris, I thank you. Finally, some sense I get. Equality equals no special treatment. What fantastic news about migration control. I can smile now. Nigel, your Brexit vote has caused more damage to every household in the UK than EU immigration since 2004. Well, Bones, I'm sorry, matey, if that's the way you feel, but actually, maybe, just maybe, we're about to get a more sensible migration policy. I love the top lines of this report, the fact we should not have a discriminatory immigration system, and the fact that we should base it on people who are higher skilled. It sounds fantastic. I'm sorry to say, there is a very serious sting in the tail of all of this. I'm going to tell you in a moment why this report, despite its top lines, will actually lead to more people coming into Britain, not fewer, and why the whole thing in the end will be seen to be a gigantic con. That in a moment, but for now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. Time for the news headlines. So the Migration Advisory Committee says, correctly in my view, once free movement ends, we must stop our discriminatory immigration policy which favours EU citizens over those from the rest of the world, and we need an immigration policy that makes it easier for higher skilled workers to come into the country, because it acknowledges in this report that actually at the bottom end of the market it's hurt a lot of working people in Britain. So it sounds terrific, but as you know, folks, the devil is always in the detail. Read the small print. And folks, here it is. This is why this is actually a complete, massive con. And I'm sorry to have to say this. So at the moment, we have a Tier 2 threshold for immigration for skilled workers. And what it says is that those that are coming into here from outside the European Union require a degree or vocational training and qualification above, and they must earn a minimum of £30,000 a year, provided they are experienced workers. That's how we define somebody who's coming in here as a skilled worker. But this same report recommends that if European Union or European Economic Area migrants are part of this as well, they are recommending reducing the Tier 2 qualifications to include a minimum of an A-level, not degree you notice, or vocational equivalent. Examples of such jobs may include bakers, hospitality, care workers and retail jobs. So the same report that says we've had this wrong for years, here's a way forward, let's go for higher skills, let's not discriminate across the rest of the world, actually wants to redefine what a skilled worker is to include virtually everybody. And that actually means that if this report is carried out by the government, we will in fact have slackened and loosened our rules on who can come into this country, and the immigration figures are likely, far from going down because of Brexit, to actually go up. So I'm afraid, folks, this report, whilst the principles, whilst the headlines may have been music to my ears, this report simply isn't good enough. And what is wrong with the government? What is wrong with the British establishment? Why are they so scared to recognise the fact that there are many millions of us who believe that whilst net migration running at 30,000 a year for 50 years after World War II worked pretty well, that net migration running at 300,000 a year since the early part of this century has not worked, has led to division in society, has led to increased tension between communities, has led to wages going down, houses being unaffordable for our youngsters, GP appointments being difficult to get. Oh, and yes, the traffic is worse on our roads because there are 2.5 million more cars out there than there were 5 years ago. And that's what happens when your population increases by 6.5 million over the course of the last 17 years. And nobody is prepared to face up to it. Back to our callers, I'm very disappointed. You know, when I saw the news coming out this morning, I thought this is really great news. When I've read the small print, I'm somewhat dismayed, I have to say. Jack is a brand new caller from Canary Wharf. Hi, Jack. Good evening.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So is the basic principle of non-discriminatory immigration the right one?
Well, look, I actually don't believe that the policy set by the European Union or the connection that we have with the European Union in relation to immigration is discriminatory at all. In fact, I think quite the contrary. We share a lot of values with the European Union.
Do we?
And we have a lot.
Do we?
Of course we do, Nigel. Of course you're going to suggest that we don't, because you believe that the European Union is a work of Satan. It isn't. And for a lot of us in this country, we value immigration. We value those who come over here and they work in our NHS. And they work alongside us. They do a lot for us and they protect us. And we value their input into society. And we know they are a net benefit to the economy.
No, we don't.
But of course, we do know that. We know that they're a net benefit.
No, we don't. No, Jack, we don't. The House of Lords report on this, very extensive report, said that in terms of pure economics, it was broadly neutral.
Well, this is nonsense, isn't it? Because, of course, that there is a lot to be said about whether or not those coming from other countries fit in the economy and whether or not they can integrate into society. And that is a separate argument. But the argument that they come into the country and they take from the economy and don't give back is total nonsense. I've had the absolute pleasure of working with many from the European Union, and they are fantastic individuals, amazing people. And those individuals we should value for the input they put into society, and they are victimised. They are made to feel as though they're not welcome in this country, and I feel as though that we are doing them an injustice when they give so much to us.
Jack, do you believe from what you've just said, do you believe that Europeans are superior to those who come here?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
But it sounds like it, because you're saying they're such fantastic. Let me ask you, Jack, do you feel a closer kinship with Romanians or Canadians?
Well, but again, this is the point about whether or not I feel as though it's discriminatory, because I don't. In fact, those from Poland or Lithuania or from Spain, I feel just as much akin to as those from Canada. But I'm not saying, or I'm not suggesting, that we should let more in from the European Union, but we share a lot of values with those from the European Union.
Let me assume, Jack, that I'm going to go along with you. We share a lot of values, right? Fine. And by the way, I'm very pro-European. It's the EU I'm against.
Okay, of course.
All right, but Jack, let's take that premise of your argument that we have a lot of shared values. Fine. Did it make sense for the numbers that could come here to be limitless?
But they're not limitless, are they?
Yes, they are.
Well, explain to me how they're limitless. Because if you go into the treaty, for example, in the European treaties that we signed when we became a member, it quite clearly states that if you come into the country, you must have access to certain things. So if you want to come in, you must have access to health insurance, and you must be able to sustain yourself for 3 years.
Jack, that was the EEC. That was the EEC. That morphed into the EC, then became the EU. Look at your passport, Jack. The first two words on it are European Union. Surely the point here is that the numbers that are allowed to come into this country are limitless. I mean, I made a big thing. When Romania joined. I said we should not be opening up the door unconditionally to Romania. It does not make sense. Our minimum wage is about 7 times higher than it is in Romania. Romania itself is in the grip of organised crime and many, many other problems, and I argued very strongly that we should not open up the doors. I also argued, Jack, that if we went down this route, I thought that up to 250,000 Romanians may well come into this country, and that was a figure that I, happy to admit, I stole from Migration Watch, who were quite good at this sort of thing. The last census I saw, there are now 425,000 Romanians in this country, and in 5 years' time it could be 1 million. Isn't the point, Jack, that actually British people are very fair-minded, they want to think the best of everybody, they want to get on, but one of the points about Brexit wasn't being anti-immigration or anti-immigrant, it was about having control on the numbers.
Well, the point is that we can limit the numbers.
How?
I mean, take, for instance, Theresa May. When she was Home Secretary, she twice pledged that she wanted to bring immigration numbers down to the tens of thousands. Now, she wasn't able to achieve that, and she's Prime Minister now and still isn't able to achieve that.
That was an election pledge, Jack, wasn't it? She never meant it.
Well, fine. But if you can pledge that you can bring immigration numbers down to the tens of thousands, it's quite clearly possible. But what isn't possible is over-promising and under-delivering, which is what she's doing, and trying to do the same with Brexit in general, and lying to the people and saying, I'm going to bring all of the figures down, when quite clearly we need access to the immigration, we need access to these workers to come in and to prop up the country.
Well, Jack, let me ask you. You know, I've made this point twice tonight. One last time I'm going to do it. You know, from 1950 until nearly 2000, net migration ran at 30,000 a year. Right, that's the accepted fact. Since 2001, it's been running at nearer 300,000 a year. Do you think post-Brexit that it makes sense for the sheer numbers coming into Britain to stay at around about that third of a million a year mark?
Well, I mean, this is obviously a more complex situation.
I'm asking you. You know, you've made the pro argument.
Yeah, you have to let me finish.
Go on.
Obviously, Nigel, having immigrants coming into the country is a benefit. Okay, we know this. So if you're going to say, fine, we stop immigration, or we stop the mass immigration, which we're told all the time is an issue, coming from the European Union, then as the Office for the National Statistics has suggested, from the recent figures, they'll just come from other countries anyway. We're looking at massive surges from those coming from outside the European Union, since we voted to leave the European Union anyway. So at what point do you put a cap?
Jack, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you think a net figure of 300,000 a year is a good thing for this country?
I think it's more complex than that, and you don't just say yes or no.
Well, I say no. I think it's too many. I think it's too much. There are some that would argue the economy needs it. I'm not one of them. Thank you, Jack. You've made the point passionately for European migration. Jonathan is calling from Glasgow. Jonathan, hi. Time is short, but what do you think? Do you think 300,000 a year is a reasonable number?
Well, it all depends on who's needed, what kind of skills they want. It should be targeted. If there's jobs that need to be done, that's the type of people we should go for, but there has to be limits on it. But I would say to you, Nigel, I mean, I was 100% Brexit. I mean, the EU, they're planning to destroy the nation state, but I've heard now there's going to be roaming charges, and the mighty Vince Cable is told that it's a bad idea, so I'm starting to waver now, to be honest with you.
What, Vince Cable's making you waver?
Aye, well, Vince Cable, the mighty Vince Cable, the political powerhouse Vince Cable.
Well, I tell you what, Jonathan. I said time was short. We're going to listen to Vince Cable. We're going to hear his impression of Kinking You in a minute. But for now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:30. And well, the MAC Migration Advisory Committee report says we should not discriminate in migration terms in favour of people from the EU against the rest of the world, and we should go for higher skilled workers. I agree with the top headlines. The small print leaves me horrified, because what we're actually going to do is make the definition of a higher skilled worker a lot easier and leave it all in the hands of Theresa May, who, of course, as Home Secretary, proved to be disastrous when it came to managing that one bit of migration we were in charge of, namely non-EU. Sticking with the theme, the finale today of the Liberal Democrats conference down in Brighton, and Vince Cable up on his feet and even reaching out today to Leave voters, saying he understands their anxieties and that wanting to manage immigration is not racist. Well, it's good to hear that. But he also says that Brexit is not inevitable.
It will be very costly and very painful if we crash out without a deal. The Brexit day may be the 29th of March. But it is only maybe. Brexit is not inevitable. It can and it must be stopped.
It sounds a bit like King Canute standing on that beach in East Anglia. That tide will not come in. I, as the king, will stop it from happening. It all sounds a bit desperate to me, Vince. Hey, there you go. I'm sure they had a great few days down in Brighton. Now, a little bit of business news, because you'll have heard yesterday, will you not, that Ralph Spieth, the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover, saying that actually jobs are going to be cut, things aren't going well, they're worried about the impact of a cliff-edge Brexit, and they've got falling sales. Nothing to do, Ralph, of course, with the fact that you make an awful lot of diesel cars, which are now less fashionable, and China, your biggest overseas market, is buying fewer motor cars. Not really sensible, I don't think, to blame Brexit for absolutely everything. And to compound that, BMW are planning a shutdown next year. They were planning it anyway. They now plan to start it on, yeah, you've guessed it, the 29th of March. So I tell you what, BMW, if you really want to play that game, maybe we really should put some really big tariffs on your cars coming into this country. It's all so political, it's ridiculous. Let me tell you a news story that you won't hear about that happened today. How about this? FTSE 250 insurance company, JLT, today accepted a $4.3 billion takeover offer from US financial services giant Marsh McLennan. JLT, who employ 4,000 people in the UK, saw their shares this morning rise by 32% as a result of this massive American investment in a British insurance company. These people couldn't care less about Brexit. They happen to think there are many firms in financial services in the UK that are really good news and worth investing in. But you won't see that on the front pages of the newspapers tomorrow. What you'll probably get is another diet of utter negativity about what crashing out of the European Union could mean. Ricky on Facebook says, just did a check on Google, can't find one article regarding Nigel being cleared today by the Electoral Commission. Unbelievable. Well, I led UKIP during the referendum. We had, of course, we were members of a European group in the European Parliament, members of a European foundation and party, and yeah, we had people who worked for both. Of course we did, because we were all involved in both. We were accused, accusations were made, that we'd used European money incorrectly to fund our referendum campaign, my referendum campaign here in London. After 2 years of investigation, we've come out with a completely clean bill of health. But again, Ricky, it's good news. You're not going to read about good news. That isn't the way that it works. Back to this debate. Back to a non-discriminatory immigration policy. I think it's the right thing. What does Stephen in Southampton think? Good evening, Stephen.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hiya. How are you? We're talking about immigration.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the way it affects society.
Well, we're talking, Stephen, actually, about how we should manage immigration post-Brexit. That's what we're really talking about. And
I think that we should just let it be, mate, because I think, honestly, that immigration is part of life. And the reason I say that is not only have I got a partner that's from Guyana, I have a mixed-race son, and my granddad, bless his heart, he fought in the Normandy landings, he done the D-Day landings, he done that so this country can be free. And that just means free. So we can have the best of everything, doesn't it?
Well, Stephen, look, by the way, please don't think that those of us that are arguing for immigration controls are arguing all immigration is bad, because we're not. We're absolutely not. But the point, Stephen, is, and you mentioned your partner comes from Guyana. We had a period, didn't we, starting in around about 1950, of Commonwealth migration to the United Kingdom, including countries like Guyana. But we managed it, Stephen. A net 30,000 a year coming into this country for half a century, and we managed it pretty blooming well, I think, certainly compared to most of our European neighbours. Stephen, let me ask you, do you think it's sensible to have limits on the sheer numbers that come?
Yeah, but they put in a lot. They didn't come over here just to sponge, they come over here to work.
Well,
and
actually,
therefore, if they're working, they're paying taxes, aren't they?
Actually, Stephen, those that came from the West Indies during that period all came with a skill, didn't they? You know, they could drive buses, they were nurses or whatever. They didn't just come in willy-nilly. But, Stephen, let me ask you this question again. You know, you are pro-immigration, and you've made that argument from a personal perspective and with passion. First question, do you think it's right, Stephen, that net migration should continue at as high a number as, say, 300,000 a year?
I think maybe it could be lowered, but I don't really see a problem as long as people are coming here to work and pay taxes. I really don't see that problem.
OK, but the sheer numbers are an issue. And, Stephen, secondly, what this report says today is that we shouldn't discriminate in favour of European Union citizens against the rest of the world. We should treat everybody equally. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
It does. OK, Stephen, thank you. And I think actually, to most people, you know, whatever your view on the numbers that come, I think the principle of non-discrimination makes absolute sense. I've fought for it for 20 years. I'm pleased to see it there in a government report, even if the interpretations of it may mean the numbers that come go up and don't come down. Brenda says we must not treat anyone differently, no matter where they come from, but we must take back control of our country. On Twitter, Colin says, your hatred and contempt for the EU... well, it's a fair cop. And what you think it stands for has clouded your judgment. You're not interested in detail or how Brexit may negatively impact all... Oh, please go away, for goodness sake. I'm tired of hearing about these negative impacts. I want Brexit because I believe it'll have a positive impact. But I tell you what, Colin, whether the impact is positive or negative, we will be in charge of our future. Let's go to Adam in Westminster. Adam, tell me something.
I'll tell you something, Nigel.
Go on.
The sooner we can put these immigration controls in place, the better. And you've absolutely hit the nail on the head once again, sir. 300,000 plus per year immigration. This country cannot absorb the amount of immigration that is being forced on it. And I'll tell you something else from my personal experience, and this is a free country as far as I know. I'm not going to make a racist speech because I know that's illegal and I'm not racist, but I would rather have 100 qualified doctors from India than 10,000 Eastern European uneducated people who are going to come and wash my car. Because what contribution are those people making to society? And incidentally, I'll tell you something
the
else,
argument, Adam, the argument is that people coming and washing cars or whatever are paying taxes. So the argument goes they're paying their way.
What tax are they paying, Nigel? That's absolutely rubbish. There's about 30 or 40 car washes in central London, all run by Roma gypsies, Albanians, call it what you will. You go and get your car washed, and if they put a scratch on your car and you ask them for their indemnity insurance, surprise, surprise, they don't have it. And here's another bit of opening gambit for you as well. A friend of mine's got a very nice house in Golders Green, and he recently had a mob of builders in doing his loft conversion. Surprise, surprise, did it get signed off by building control? Did it? Heck, because the people doing the building were not even qualified. So I'm sick of these people.
Yeah, I think we have had. Adam, I think we have had a lowering standards on car washing. I would say it is much easier to get your car washed now than it used to be, because that was very, very difficult. But Adam, I do get your point. Unlimited numbers of low-skilled people coming into this country, paying very, very small amounts of tax, is not a benefit to this country, and kind of that's what this report says also. And yet what it wants to do is to lower the barriers of how we define what a skilled worker is, and that's a real cheat and a real con. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:45. We discuss immigration, and there's no shortage of opinions and passion, and those politicians in Westminster who think the issue doesn't matter anymore, we've all forgotten about it, are wrong. The country still cares about it hugely. Stuart says to me by text, a question to those who favour uncontrolled immigration: why do they not call for us to have an open door policy on an international level to the whole world? Actually, Stuart, there are Corbynistas out there who say we are world citizens and we should all be free to move everywhere. So there are those that think it. I don't think I get here that a migration figure of 300,000 a year is a bad thing, provided you're able to predict it and plan for it. The problem is, with open door policies, we've had absolutely no idea how many people will come here, and therefore cannot plan schools, health, transport, housing. Spot on. an argument, again, I've been making for over a decade. People say, oh, we haven't built enough houses. We haven't built enough roads. Well, how could we if we couldn't predict how many were actually going to come into the country? It's been crazy. What about reciprocity? We've always had reciprocal rights with the EU. What happens now? That depends on what Mrs May negotiates. But generally, you know, on this point of reciprocity, UK citizens getting healthcare in other European countries has meant a bill coming back to the United Kingdom which we've paid. Too often the other way round, and the bills haven't been paid. So reciprocity is fine if it genuinely is reciprocity. Let's go to the Netherlands, to Lynn, and speak to Gordon. Gordon, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. This is a subject that's dear to my heart. Now, Theresa May, and I love all these, how can I say, snowflakes, these bleeding hearts saying, bring more people in, let them come and work into our country. But they're forgetting about the people that actually work over on mainland Europe. Now, I've been out of work for a couple of years now, and the councils here pay your benefits, and they don't give you unemployment benefit, but they claim that back to the UK as unemployment benefit. I'm on emergency benefits. Yeah. I live on £30 a week when everything is taken off. Now, I'm stuck in a dilemma. I want to come home, I want to work, I want to get myself a place, everything. But it seems to me that Theresa May is sucking up to the EU once again and letting the Brits fall down to the knees. There's hundreds that have contacted me via Facebook, via WhatsApp, via Messenger, everything, and they said they're exactly the same predicament all over Europe. Now, when you go about all this thing checking people out, now when I came here to live, they checked right through my records, and when I claimed for unemployment benefit, they said to me, you're going to have to wait 2 months before you get anything because we have to check back with the UK. Yeah. I can't do this no more here, Nigel. I want to come home because Brits here in mainland Europe are being checked worse than third-class citizens. And yet Theresa May says, I'm going to protect everybody that comes from the EU in the UK. Well, what about us? What about us Brits living over here? We're getting fired left, right and centre because they can do it and nobody bats an eyelid. We've actually outnumbered the EU migrant workers by 3 to 1. We're going to end up with a mass migration back of British people back to the UK.
But what can Mrs May do, Gordon, in one sense? Because isn't this part of the European problem? That other countries...
What she can do is turn around and say, do you know what, we're going to close the doors for 2 years. We're going to start training our young people in plastering, bricklaying, plumbing, electricity.
Well, do you know what, Gordon? That's one thing I do want to hear. Whatever happens with migration and numbers, we have got to start training our own engineers, our own nurses. We've got to start putting more emphasis on skills and trades in our country. So, Gordon, when are you going to come back then?
I don't know, because I'm having to save me money. I'm living on virtually next to nothing every week. I don't want to come home. I just can't take this no more.
No, well, that sounds pretty grim, Gordon. I'm sorry.
It's pretty grim. The hell I've been through in the past few weeks, Nigel, you would not believe it. I've been arrested for wearing a Brexit T-shirt, believe it or not.
What?
Because they said it's racial hatred.
Wow. Well, that's extraordinary. Gordon, I'm going to let you go. Leave your details, please, with the panel here. I want to find out more about that. If Brits are being discriminated against in that way across the rest of Europe, then given how generous, or some would say over-generous, we are here to EU citizens, that is clearly outrageous. I'm going to move on. John from Wales says, I've argued for 2 decades we should practice what we preach, zero discrimination. John, I'm with you, absolutely. In fact, almost nobody tonight has said that it's wrong for us to get away from this discriminatory policy. We may disagree on the numbers that are allowed to come, we may disagree on the benefits or disbenefits of mass migration, but the idea it should be non-discriminatory is right, and yet, because Mrs May wants to have the Chequers deal, that would keep all of the EU single market legislation in place, which includes all of the EU workers' rights, all of which can go to the European Court of Justice. So actually, the truth of it is, even with Mrs May's Brexit, EU workers will be treated differently to workers from the rest of the world. That's a fact. Lorraine is a new caller from Washington in West Sussex. Hi, Lorraine.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, on the face of it, this report today made sense, Lorraine, didn't it?
Absolutely. I'm a South African. I've now been here 10 years. It was 5 years before I could apply for residency. The process of residency cost my family over £4,000. We had to write a test at UK history from the Stone Age to current day. It was very stressful. To qualify for citizenship, and the part of the process also involves English tests. Now, I come from an English colony. I was schooled in English. None of my certifications allow me to pass that. I have to pay the £150 and prove that I can speak English. But my school has translators helping people who just walk through the door. My husband feels that the difference between them and us who pay to be here, we see this as our home. We're invested, we work hard, we pay our taxes, and yet we weren't allowed to have any recourse to public fund or benefit, child benefit, any benefit, until we were permanent residents. I never claimed. We worked it out. I saved the UK government £8,500 in child benefits because we never claimed. We didn't get that benefit in our country, so why should we exploit that here? This is now our home. They, foreigners come here, they don't preserve the resources, the seas, the lakes, the koi fish, the expensive lake fish that are just raped.
Well, I think that's Lorraine, that is slightly tangential, but your basic point is, if you're a South African, to get settled here cost you a great deal of time, effort and money, but if you'd come from the European Union, it would have been easy.
Yes, and I feel the whole process should be fair and people should be given equal opportunities. There should be no discrimination in any process.
No, Lorraine, I listen, I agree with that. There should be no discrimination, but neither should it be easy to come here to settle and become a UK British citizen. I've got time for one last quick caller. Evan from Slough. Good evening, Evan.
Hi, Nigel. I agree. I think UK citizens should have higher wages and we should have jobs. But there's a difference between global migration, which is great. I mean, it's an unlimited source of labour, and they're hardworking and they're likely to stay. But EU migration is from a limited pool. It's from an aging demographies, and they're limited, high-demand young mobile workers. So they easily integrate, and they can readily migrate back to work. So when you have a turn down in the economy begins to slow down. EU workers can migrate back to those locations. That's why having 50% EU and 50% global is so much more flexible, keeps our economy strong, it keeps wages up, it keeps jobs. But if we go for pure global migration, I can see there's no discrimination there, but it doesn't give our economy that flexibility and that power that...
Okay, all right. No, you've made it... Evan, you've made a counter-argument, and a very interesting one, and I thank you. I promise you, folks, this subject is not going away. I love the headlines I saw this morning from the Migration Advisory Council. I saw the small print, and I was horrified. They're not going to do anything about huge numbers coming to Britain, despite your Brexit vote. They don't want to. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show. I'll be back tomorrow night at 6. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick, but up next, it's Ian Dale.
Nigel, thank you very much.